And the people I feel really sorry for is the posties, because as they're going about doing their work, they're the ones that are getting it, in the neck on the doorstep when people see the postman out and say, look, where are my letters? What's going on?
Both parties are now heading into Christmas, reflecting not just on the year gone by, but on the big election battle approaching in the next 13 months. Labour would like to turn the spotlight in part on the NHS, arguing that the government has failed to deliver on promises made to protect the health service. Waiting times are getting longer. Well, Wes Streeting is the Shadow Home Secretary, and he joins us now. Good morning to you, Mr. Streeting.
Good morning.
Can I just ask you quickly about Royal Mail? We, of course, have had the cases of the postmasters who were wrongly accused of stealing, and many of whom had their lives ruined. We've now got this issue of Royal Mail denying something which the Sunday Times has shown is going on, which is the prioritising of parcels over letters. Do you think it's time for some sort of intervention to sort out the Royal Mail?
I think Royal Mail have got some serious questions to answer. I mean, you mentioned the sub-postmasters scandal. I had a constituent whose life and livelihood was utterly ruined and devastated by that particular scandal. And now, with the Christmas post, I mean, look, I've been raising concerns about this as a constituency MP in terms of the reliability of my local post. And so it's disappointing that Royal Mail seems to be saying, one thing to the public, and then the Sunday Times has exposed the complete opposite. I think they do have serious questions to answer, and the people I feel really sorry for is the posties, because as they're going about doing their work, they're the ones that are getting it, in the neck on the doorstep when people see the postman out and say, look, where are my letters? What's going on? It's not their fault at all. This is a really busy time of year for them. They work extremely hard. I'll be making sure to thank my postman this year. But I think the Royal Mail bosses have serious questions to answer.
Now, let's stick to the facts, the statistics that we have, because obviously I know you have a very important political axe to grind. But on the basis of the targets which the Conservatives set themselves, the government set themselves for this year in the NHS, how are they doing?
Well, badly. I mean, the Prime Minister promised to cut waiting lists. He's failed. Back in January, he said, we're not going to have another winter crisis like before because I'm going to deliver 5,000 more beds. I'm going to make sure we get more ambulances. I'm going to deal with delayed discharges. He's fallen short in every single one of those areas and sent the NHS naked into winter. It's absolutely appalling mismanagement, and it's a pattern we've seen now over 13 years, and that's why for the last 2 years as Shadow Health and Social Care Secretary, I've been setting out the case that in order to get the NHS not just back on its feet but fit for the future, we need that combination of investment and crucially reform to make sure that we've got a modern health system able to meet the challenges of the 21st century, where rising ageing population, rising chronic disease and rising cost pressures threaten to both overwhelm the NHS but also to bankrupt it. And that's why I've been so firm on NHS reform as I was in last week's Sunday Times, and I noticed the letters page of the paper this week is full of reaction to that piece, because I think there are loads of people who either use the NHS or work in the NHS who can see that it needs to change and it needs to modernise and it needs to root out waste and inefficiency. And when money is tight, as it is because the Conservatives have trashed the public finances, it's even more important that we spend every penny that goes into the NHS wisely.
Yeah, well, as you've heard, we've just been speaking to the Deputy Prime Minister, and his argument is effectively that Labour, because of the state of the economy, is setting expectations so low that there really is nothing in what you're saying to suggest that if you were in charge of the NHS this winter, things would be any better.
I mean, honestly, the brass neck of expectation management. I mean, the extraordinary thing about Rishi Sunak's 5 pledges made back in January is we criticised them, saying he set the bar so low that even Boris Johnson could stumble over the bar. And yet, apart from one of those pledges, he has broken every single other one. The one he's kept is the one that every impartial analyst says is one that is to do with global factors rather than domestic policy. So I think the Deputy Prime Minister's got a bit of brass neck there talking about expectation management. What we have been doing is setting out a range of practical policies that will enable us to get the NHS back on its feet and reform at the same time. So, for example, by providing an extra 2 million more appointments a year, a £1.1 billion commitment, fully costed, fully funded, we won't just be cutting waiting lists, we will be changing the way the NHS operates so that all hospitals are adopting the sort of model we've seen at Guy's and St Thomas's, which has shown real results in terms of bringing their waiting lists down faster than they otherwise would have. Or our community mental health hubs and support in every school. Yes, a crucial new service, but one that also eases pressure on GPs and diverts people away from A&E. And then there's the GPs who complain that they are tied up in huge amounts of red tape when what they really want to do is focus on their patients. So the reform there will be to reduce the number of accountability measures that GPs have and put greater incentive and weight in terms of their funding on that continuity of care, the family-doctor relationship. So you can see the pattern with Labour. Yes, investment that's fully costed and fully funded, but linked to reform so that over time we can deliver the three big shifts we need, from a sickness service to one that's focused on prevention, from an analogue service to one that's more digitally driven, and crucially making sure that we are cutting waiting lists and dealing with that modernisation at the same time.
But West Streeting, I mean, very briefly, because we don't have a huge amount of time with you, it's going to cost a lot of money. Are you prepared to invest significant sums of money to make sure that the changes you want to make can be made quickly so that people can really feel a difference?
Well, we've already made some significant commitments. We've not made many spending commitments because money is tight, but on the NHS we've made significant commitments that will help us to cut waiting lists, invest in mental health services, NHS dentistry, which is, if you want to look at the ghost of Christmas future, we've made really clear pledges there. But my message to the system has been money is going to be tight. It's going to take time to get the economy back to growth, and that's why we've got to make sure that every penny that goes in is money well spent. And I don't want people complacently assuming that we will be able to just turn the taps on and put vast sums of money in, because the money is simply not there thanks to 13 years of Conservative economic mismanagement.
The government has signalled a change in the tone around ceasefire in Gaza today. David Cameron suggesting a sustainable ceasefire is the way forward. Is that something that Labour is supportive of?
Well, just this week on Radio 4, Keir Starmer was talking about the need for a ceasefire and the path to get there.
A full
we all
ceasefire?
Want to see an
is
end
that
to
a full
this bloodshed.
ceasefire? Sorry, West Streeting.
Of course we want to see a ceasefire. The challenge is, how do you get there when a ceasefire requires agreement between both parties to the conflict? And that feels far away at the moment, but you see intolerable civilian losses in Gaza. We've seen harrowing images emerge from Gaza of the innocent people, particularly children, who've been seriously injured or killed as a result of this military action. Hostages are still being held and families are grieving for their loved ones. So this is a desperately difficult situation. We're also concerned by the comments made by the Israeli ambassador to the United Kingdom this week, and comments we hear from senior Israeli government officials, which appear to abandon the two-state solution. Now, the ongoing subjugation of the Palestinian people as a permanent solution to this conflict is no solution at all. We need a negotiated political route out of both the current conflict, but also decades of the endless cycle of violence between Israelis and Palestinians.
Can I just be very clear here?
The approach a Labour government takes.
Yeah, can I just be very clear here? Is Labour calling for an immediate ceasefire?
Well, I don't think we can call for an immediate ceasefire. How would such an immediate ceasefire come about? This has been the challenge all along. We've still got hostages being held. We've still got Hamas threatening to carry out further attacks on Israel of the type we saw on the 7th of October again and again. But the international community has got to work together to try and bring about not just the humanitarian pause that we saw recently, but to bring about a sustainable ceasefire. That's where we all want to get to. The challenge is, how do you get from where we are today to that position? Don't pretend any of this is easy, but that, you know, ultimately in the long bloody history of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, it will only be a political solution, a negotiated peace that will bring an end to this cycle of violence and make sure that both Israelis and Palestinians are able to live with peace, freedom and security.
Now, Wes Streeting, we've got about 30 seconds left. I asked Oliver Dowden this question. I'll put the same one to you. Looking back on the year for Labour, what would you give yourself as a report card, marks out of 10?
We'll leave it to the voters to judge us, and we'll leave that to them, particularly at the general election. I think people can see a changed Labour Party and the change that Keir Starmer has led in the Labour Party, and I hope that gives people greater confidence in the Labour Party's ability to deliver the change this country desperately needs, and that general election can't come soon enough.